Hey everybody, thank you for attending this talk. My name is Yazan, and today I'm going to be talking about product usage analytics, a very important subject that a lot of product managers or product marketers might find intimidating at first. But my goal today is to simplify it and give you a framework that is very simple to understand and would give you a ton of insights on what your users are doing and how they're moving along the user journey, and help you use that data to increase very important metrics like user activation or feature adoption. So what we're going to be going through today is first, we're going to try to understand what does product usage analytics mean. Why do we need it in the first place? Who needs it? And then we're gonna start trying to build that framework, right? So what should we be tracking? And then how are we gonna have that initial setup and use that setup to create a framework that can give us insights about our users and what they're doing in app. And finally, we're going to touch upon, well, how are we going to use that data? A little background about me. I am the co-founder and CEO of Userpilot. We help more than 500 plus product teams increase user activation, feature adoption through in-app engagement. And I've been in SaaS for, well, a little bit more than 9 years now, building and scaling SaaS products. And yeah, so let's get started. Okay, so what is it really, product usage analytics? It's a way for us to study what are the users doing in app, right? So it's everything that happens within the application, right? At this point, we don't care what happens outside. We don't care where the users are coming from, right? What are they doing outside the application? It's everything inside, okay? And we want to basically understand what users are doing and how different segments are using the app, right? And in particular, in this case, we look at two different types of data. One is who is the user, right? What are their attributes? Things like identifiable data, like their email, their name, when did they sign up, when was the last time they were seen, country, language, what's their role? Are they an admin or a normal user? All of the characteristics of a user, we can also apply that to accounts, right? So if you're selling B2B enterprise SaaS products and you're selling it, you're probably selling it to teams, not just individual users. You can also have that characteristics for an account. And that's the first type of data we're going to look at, identifying users or accounts. And then the second type is behavioral data, like what pages are these users visiting? Where are they clicking? What features they're using? What goals they're completing, right? And this all heavily depends on quantitative data, right? Like actual real data, number of clicks, number of page views, etc., etc. And I should mention that identification can be on a user level or an account level, but behavioral data is almost always on a user level, right? So if a user clicks somewhere or visited a page, this is all going to be user data. Okay, so why do we need that? Well, we need to understand the user journey, right? We need to also understand where the dropout points that are happening. So if I had 100 new signups yesterday. It would be very useful to know how many of those users actually got activated. If I define my activation as a user coming in, creating a campaign, connecting their email, and inviting a team member, like that's activation. It would be useful to know out of the 100 how many actually have done all three goals, right? And so it's very useful to understand the movement within the user journey, right? New users becoming activated becoming power users, and power users becoming champions, right? That's your whole goal, right? You want to move people along the user journey. If you are converting more new users to activated users, you're definitely increasing free trial to paid conversion. If you're moving more activated users to power users and champions, you're increasing expansion revenue, right? So we need to understand where are we falling short moving users along the journey. It's also useful to just understand and measure overall product engagement and stickiness, right? We want our goal as product managers or product marketers to increase product engagement, build more sticky products. And yeah, we can just get an overall understanding, which are there any segments that are more successful than other segments? Are there segments that are using, a specific features more than all the other segments? These are all this is useful data for you. And we'll talk towards the end, like how you can use that. But also we can try to create hypotheses to when is actually the best time to push a feature for users, and that kind of can dictate your whole in-app engagement strategy. So who needs that? Obviously, product managers who care a lot to know the features that they've been working on very hard, and are they being used or not? Product growth managers also who care about moving users throughout the whole journey, increasing activation, trial to paid, expansion revenue. Product marketing, pushing and marketing the right feature at the right time, at the right stage of the user journey. Product analysts and UX designers as well, to try to improve the user experience. Okay, so now let's try to start establishing that framework. And the first thing is that we need to collect data, right? And you, in this stage, you're probably going to have to work closely with your engineering team to try to track both characteristics and custom events, at least these two. And with other like mouse events or page views, feature tags, you can probably use a software to do that for you automatically. But at least the first two, the attributes and the custom events, you need to work with your engineering team, and you need to ask yourself, what do I want to track? Both about the attributes and the custom events. For example, maybe I want to track the role of the user, or the plan that they're in, their sign-up date. These are all very important to understand key characteristics about the user or the account. Custom events are usually things that either happen on the back end, sometimes the front end, that they're not necessarily instigated by a mouse event or a click that the user has done. For example, they just became a paid customer, or that they just created a campaign, although these things can also be instigated by a click, but it's better, at least for the key ones, to do them through the backend. You know, as any changes to the UI sometimes can just ruin all your data. And also, yeah, mouse events. You can find a lot of analytics products that would track clicks for you, and you can just create feature tags out of those clicks or feature tags. And the last thing is going to be page views, right? So that's everything we're going to track. Okay, so now that we're tracking all the data that we need to do the initial setup, right? So basically, we're going to set up our segments. We're going to set up the key goals that we want to maximize. And we also want to set up and track the features that we care about and that we also want to maximize. Okay, so first of all, we want to set up our segments. And the best way to do that is to, at least initially, segment your users based on where they are in the user journey. So maybe you want to have the new user segment. Those are the evaluators. They maybe signed up within the last week. They haven't really done anything. They're not activated, and they're just still evaluating the product. And then another segment would be the activated users. Those are that started getting value out of your product. So let's say if you're a CRM, maybe they connected their email, they uploaded a list of contacts, and they sent a campaign, right? They created a campaign. Let's say that's your activation, and those will be the activated users. The power users would be the ones that are starting to use more secondary features. And then you have the champions, right? Those are the ones that are raving fans of your product, and they're telling their colleagues about it. You can also create segments based on, you know, whether they're they're in trial still, they're paid, upgraded. Yeah, so this is going to be important, probably the most important step. Initially, you will create these kind of like flywheel segments, like new users, activated, power users, to understand, you know, what percentage of your users are activated, right, or they're power users. But the more advanced your segmentation gets, you know, you'll use that to understand, like, segment X, they're completing a specific goal more than segment Y, and it'll just be more advanced. Okay, and then after you set up your segment, you want to set up your key goals. Key goals, these are events that happens. Again, this can happen on the front end. It can also happen in the back end. But I recommend that you would use custom events that are happening through the back end, and don't depend too much on the front end, because as your UI changes, you're going to have to keep changing things. But with custom events, it's always going to be the same. Yeah, events like they became activated, or they became paying, they invited a team member, they created a campaign. These are not necessarily features, right? So notice the difference between goals and features. Features are you have interacted with a specific part of the UI. It's mostly instigated by a click. Custom events, they're not always instigated by something that happens on the front end. And then we finally need to set up the features. For setting up your features, I recommend using just any product that allows you to tag a specific part of your UI. Mostly these are clicks or hovers, mouse events, page views. So yeah. I recommend tracking everything, like every button click, every page view, just and creating all the features that you have, try to track them. Okay, so now we have tracked a bunch of things and used that to create our segments. And then we're going to take a look at, goal completion, the things that we care most about, and then features, right? And we're going to try to answer questions like, how often is this goal being completed, in a time frame by a segment, right? So that's easy to plot, right? So we are tracking the goal completion occurrence, and it's just a time series, and we can filter that, we can filter that by segment and a time period, right? So let's say I have a goal, which is that a user has created a campaign. I can see the count of that goal being completed every day, right? And I can also filter that by segment. I can compare two segments, right? How often is, my admin segment creating a campaign versus, another segments, which is, members of the team. And this is going to give you great insights to understand. Maybe you can put a specific goal in mind that you want for your users to be in a healthy state. They need to at least create one campaign per month, for example, and you can evaluate against that. Another way is, which is actually the same framework, a time series with feature usage, right? How often a feature is being used, right? Same as a goal. You can look at a segment, and you can also look at a time period to do that. Both of these will give you a lot of good insights on, the things that we talked about earlier. What are the popular features? How often a feature is used? How different segments use different features or achieves different goals. This is very simple stuff, but it can give you a lot of good insights. You can also use a couple of advanced techniques to kind of like zoom in on specific actions. This is like, I would use it, for example, for activation. So let's say your activation, as we said earlier, let's say it's, step one, they do an action. Step two, they have to do another action. Step three, that's your activation. You can look at all three and put them in a funnel. So like that's basically what funnel analysis is. In this case, for example, I have, 3 steps, and I can see that 123 people entered the funnel. So they have done the first step, but only 4 completed all 3, right? If this is my activation, my activation is actually 4 out of 123. Where is the dropout really happening? Well, it's happening in step 2, right? So out of a whole 123, only 14 did the second step. And the dropout from the second step to the third step is not really, it's not as bad as the dropout that happened between 1 and 2. So I know here, for example, that I have a problem in the second step, right? And if you look at it, let's say your activation, and you find out that that's where the dropout is from that series of events, you're going to focus on that. You're going to try to understand why that dropout is happening and try to improve it. Okay, and finally, another advanced technique would be cohort analysis. And cohort analysis, it looks at a specific group that share the similar characteristics. In this case, let's say, I want to look at how are the users that signed up in July, like what's their retention rate, for example, and compare them to a cohort of signups in August, right? And then you can also see with time what is the retention. Right? In this example, it's a 10-day retention, and I'm looking at different cohorts and comparing that, right? This is useful mostly to understand like retention, users coming back, and comparing like signups from 1 month and compare them to the other month. Okay, so we talked about, goal completion. We talked about feature usage. We talked about funnel analysis and also cohort analysis. What are we going to do with all that data? The most important thing is that we need to understand where users are dropping out in the user journey, right? So if you find out that you have a problem with activation, right? So your new users are just not activating. You're gonna try to understand why that is happening, and maybe even do a funnel analysis to see where exactly the dropout is happening. We're gonna also look at how different segments are using different features in the product, and focus on personalizing the user experience based on who the user is, basically. You can personalize the messaging. So maybe you want to push segment A to use feature X first rather than feature Y. And we can also come up with hypotheses. Maybe it's better to push feature X after a specific event happens, and because that will maximize the feature adoption for it. We can also we need to explain the quantitative data with qualitative data, because sometimes we maybe can't explain why something is happening. So you need to try to explain that with maybe user interviews or in-app surveys as well. As final thoughts, I think product usage analytics is very essential for a lot of roles, especially in product. It can get complex, but to get started with it, which my goal was today, just to show you how you can easily get started with it with something very simple. Shouldn't be a very complex. You can use some tools to track, feature tags, clicks, page views, all of that for you, and get the help of your engineering team with things like identifying users and certain key custom events. Remember to think about your key goals. What are your key goals and how they translate to better business outcomes, right? So if I increase activation, then how is that gonna affect, trial to paid conversion, for example, right? So set up the goals you care about. Also track, all the features basically that your product has, and yeah, sometimes you might have to use funnel completion analysis or cohort analysis to get a better view of, for example, activation or retention. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to reach out with any questions. Yeah, and thank you so much for watching.